Welcome back to the Orthodox Ethos podcast. I'm Father Peter Heers. We're glad that you're joining us today. We're going to be looking at Christ, the crisis in Catholicism, the Orthodox perspective, Orthodox perspectives on the Pope's blessing of same-sex couples. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have with us today as our guests, Joseph Sciambra and Craig Patrick Trulia and Mark Clark to talk about the developments in the Roman Catholic world, and in particular, the Orthodox ethos and the Orthodox response. Let me put everybody on the screen there. We're better off. Before we get into the slideshow that we've prepared and some clips from different responses to this new crisis within Catholicism, maybe we can just have our guests say a word or two of introduction, and then we'll look at the outline for today's discussion. We'll start with Craig, who's well known to the Orthodox Ethos crowd. How you doing today, Craig?
Doing good. It's good to be here, Father.
All right. Glory to God. You got a new background I can see there. A nice background.
Well, it's fake, so don't be too impressed.
That's good. It's good. You've probably read as many books as that. Joseph, how you doing? Glad to have you on the podcast. Glad it was very providential that you reached out to us, and we also were considering this podcast, and you have a lot of experience and knowledge on the topic. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Father, for inviting me. It's a real honor.
So you've been Orthodox how many years now?
A little over a year.
And so you're coming from Catholicism.
Yes, Father.
Lifelong Roman Catholic.
Yes, Father.
Yeah, you'll have to tell us a little bit about that as we go into it. I'm sure some of your personal experiences will and anecdotes will help us understand better the crisis and the issue at hand, and then also I think you'll give us some insight into the Orthodox response. It's for some of us as Orthodox, it's there, but it's not obviously something on our radar for most of us. So we're trying to get today's podcast is to get a handle on what happened from an Orthodox perspective. What would be our analysis or our take? How would we respond, and help both Orthodox Christians understand the proper Orthodox analysis, and those among Roman Catholics who are seeking clarity, seeking the patristic view, seeking the Orthodox understanding. Hopefully our podcast today will help them as well. And Mark, thank you for joining us again. I know you were on Patrick's podcast earlier. Was it last week? And thank you for your contribution and your backgrounds. Tell us a little about yourself, and apologize for the camera. No camera today. We got Mark. Can you hear us? I think we might have some technical issues with his connection. I don't know.
Well, Mark will be back, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's jump into the.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. There he is. Good. Give us a little word of introduction. How are you doing today?
Okay. I'm doing well. My experience is working with editing of Orthodox books. Like you, Father Peter, I've also worked alongside Roman Catholics in the pro-life movement, and I've come to respect them as having done a lot of good social work, both in the area of conservative policies in pro-life and homosexuality.
All right, Mark. Thank you. So we're going to be looking at the question of same-sex blessing, or blessing of same-sex couples. I think it's well known what transpired previously with the encyclical from Pope Francis. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody what we always do on this channel is try to direct everyone back to the Holy Fathers, to the Church Fathers, to Church saints of the Church, because there's no way to come to know the truth or to grasp theology in any other way but by following the saints. And that's what our goal is here. So we'll be talking about something which, of course, the saints would not have addressed, something new, an innovation, but bringing to bear as much as we can the Orthodox patristic mind, that as far as we understand it. So the basic outline for today will be the historical significance. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then our guests can chime in just how historically significant is it. The innovation, as it's called within the encyclical itself, it's referring to innovative ways of dealing with this topic. The implications of the decision and the response from the Orthodox, but also what we're seeing among Roman Catholic apologists, and what we've seen as the called for response from authorities within Catholicism going back generations. So the first thing that is just to put out there is this is stated and issued from the dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, which was once upon a time called the Inquisition. They didn't have a different name under Ratzinger. Do you remember, Joseph? It was called the Congregation on the Faith. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is also something new to me, the dicastery on the Doctrine of the Faith. I think it's rather recent as far as the title goes. And they issued this. This is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the highest body in terms of issuing these kind of declarations after the Pope. Is that correct? As far as you know,
this is the highest body, and the Pope actually signs on to the official releases of this organization. This body is in charge of defending the Catholic faith and dogma against heresies and new innovations. That's its role.
Yes.
So it's kind of curious that they would issue this document, which seems much more pastoral, and yet they're the ones charged to defend the faith. Is that intentional?
Cardinal Ratzinger used to be in charge of this office.
Right.
Yeah.
Who, the man in charge now is Fernandez. Is that the right name?
Fernandez.
Fernanda? Is that
Cardinal?
Yeah. The director is Victor Manuel Fernandez, Cardinal from Argentina, like the Pope.
Okay. So there's also some new news about him in the last 24, 48 hours, which was, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk about that. It's kind of off topic, but it's not totally irrelevant, right? He has a book that's surfaced that he wrote years ago, which is quite scandalous for a lot of people. Does anybody know about that? Have you paid attention to that? I haven't paid much attention.
A little bit, Father. It's sort of, I'm kind of bemused by why Catholics are shocked by things that their church does, but it seems like he was sort of exploring the latent eroticism in Catholic theology, and which me as an art history major, I mean, you see that in a lot of art, Catholic art, especially during the Renaissance. So I don't kind of get the shock, but it's okay.
Well, there's apparently a lot of different segments and sections of Catholicism today, which don't really talk to one another much. Would you say that's accurate?
Probably, yeah.
In my experience 30 years ago, when I was involved, I was going as a catechumen before I discovered Orthodoxy. I was among the pro-life group, the kind of moral crusading type of Roman Catholic, very conservative, traditional Latin Mass, and so that was a kind of world unto itself. And then there's other worlds that I never even encountered, the charismatic world, or the very modernist world, or I guess the homosexual wing of Catholicism. So maybe that's part of the explanation, is that people live kind of, intentionally cut off from a lot of these things, and so they're surprised, but they probably.
In the trad world, there's a definite bunker mentality, but they should have a cursory knowledge of Catholic art and history, which is a little shocking. So
the other thing
I would add, in any institution as large as the Roman Catholic Church, even in some corners of the Orthodox Church, so mostly the English-speaking West, is you're going to have diversity, and the diversity is not all going to be good things. So like while in Orthodoxy, we have certain elements of liturgical adversity. The Arabs will raise their hands during the Our Father. The Russians and Greeks generally tend not to, and things like that. But you even could get certain elements of intellectual and theological diversity. And sadly for us speaking English, this is particularly a problem in English-speaking Orthodoxy in the West, where we see overt entertaining of some of these same moral issues. I don't need to name the journals and whatnot that exist, and the universities with Orthodox faculty members that push these things. And so the Orthodoxy in the English language has this, because again, any large institution has problems like this. And the Roman Catholic Church is probably the largest singular institution on earth. And so the numbers behind some of these different wings that you guys refer to are just very, very large. In fact, could almost subsume the entire Orthodox Church entirely.
So the other thing that jumped, thanks, Patrick, I appreciate it. Thanks. One of the things that jumps off the page in terms of the historic significance is what we're looking at first, was that well known, at least on paper, at least in statements for non-Roman Catholics especially, was this impression that it was one of the strongest opponents of immorality, fighting in the public square against abortion and other issues. So this seems to be, from that perspective, quite a sea change. Although Joseph might say it's really not justified, that impression, but that is the impression many people have.
Impression, yeah, on paper.
On paper, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. The average Roman Catholic has been pretty shocked by this, even though we've been heading this direction a long time, but it's been shocking on a popular level.
And so this comes across as certainly appearing to support those who were one time known as dissidents or innovators. I mean, the document, as we said, hails a kind of good innovation in this sphere, and the dissidents are rejoicing. So the public impression is that the dissidents have one of their own in the papacy. Is that in any way disputed today by like traditional Roman Catholics?
No. I remember when Cardinal Ratzinger walked out on the balcony at the Vatican. I was like, wow, this is great. We're going to see some major changes. And I think in terms of like the TLM for allowance for the traditional Latin Mass, I think we did. Mm-hmm. And then, but when Bergoglio came out, he was kind of an unknown quantity. He was from Argentina, and I didn't know much about him. But it started to drip out. So
quickly, I remember it quickly. There was a lot of news pretty quickly. From an Orthodox perspective, it's kind of strange because what they consider traditional doesn't seem very traditional, to at least in my perspective. So what the spectrum is very much further to the left in many ways from an Orthodox perspective, but I guess it's even gone quite much further today. Let's see, the document, as we said, talking about the innovation, the section that I'm calling innovation, which we can talk about anything you like in this sphere. It doesn't have to stay to the outline, but these are helping our discussion. The document does, as we said, celebrate innovation. And as again, we said, defenders and those opposed say it is a change. And I think that's something that Mark brought up as really significant. Do you want to comment on that, Mark?
Absolutely, Father. This document, page 1, it says that this is an innovation, an innovative contribution. It says that this is a real development. There's frequent references that this can cause confusion. There's 8 references to confusion throughout the document. But Cardinal Fernandez says that the Pope has urged them that we broaden our perspective because there's a danger that there are too many moral prerequisites. He says on the second page that the Pope has urged us to avoid being judges and to develop a broader understanding of blessings. He also says the Church must shy away from resting its pastoral praxis on the fixed nature of certain doctrinal schemes. So they are developing doctrine, and they are very specific that that's what this document is doing.
So how would we characterize the doctrinal development exactly?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
So specifically,
well, I was just going to add that. I'm sorry, you go, Mark.
Specifically, this is carving out a new area called a pastoral blessing. Previously, the document in 2021 under the same Pope that addressed same-sex blessing said that we could not have any blessing on something that is immoral in its nature, because it says homosexuality is immoral at its nature. And so even if there's a good element in there, such as communication or a relationship, you can't bless something immoral at its heart. And this document expands or goes against that original and updates it to say we can bless the couple as long as we're blessing the union. And we can perform this blessing pastorally as long as we don't do it liturgically.
Did you mean to say as long as we're not blessing the union?
You cut out there.
Yeah, we got a very lagging connection, unfortunately. Did you mean to
there-
say that as long as we're not blessing the union? I think you said as long as we're blessing the union, but
We can bless the
they have-
couple, but not the union.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So there's another thing that comes up, and this is in our discussion, I think, earlier before we went online, and that is that there is a perceived chasm between the teaching and the practice. Or rather, not a perceived chasm between the teaching and the practice. In other words, what they teach, what Catholicism teaches, what the Pope has held, is practiced. But in practice, in many places, at least in America, it seems to be that the practice and the teaching are quite divided already. And so the question I have is, has this encyclical now brought in an ironic and tragic way the teaching and the practice further together? And I direct that to Joseph first.
Yes, Father. I don't know how cogent this example is, but I remember talking to a priest, God rest his soul, Catholic priest, but he described sort of the lead up to where communion in the hand became a norm, and then altar girls. And he described how in certain parishes, by certain priests, by certain bishops and dioceses, that with no okay from the Vatican, certain priests had just started the practice of communion in the hand or allowing altar girls. So years later, those things were permitted by the church. And he said primarily because the Pope or the Vatican realized that if they were to forbid these practices, that certain priests, bishops, and whole dioceses would just continue to do them. So with these gay marriage blessings, they've been going on for years. I've attended them in San Francisco in the 1990s. So I think the church is just kind of catching up to what's going on the pastoral level. And I think the Germans took the lead and said, well, we're just going to officially go ahead and do this. And if the Vatican were to come out and say, well, you can't, certainly the Germans would keep doing it, and a lot of other priests and bishops and dioceses would allow that to continue as well. So the Vatican is always scared of schism. So rather than have some sort of schism take place, they permit it. So they've permitted it. And,
This is some of the commentary that I saw earlier, that in fact what's happening is that they're trying to avoid a schism. That was the justification for this to some. My guess is that they have different justifications for different people, and usually this double talk. And one of the things I want to talk about today is there seems to be a lot of double speak. Some people call it Jesuit double speak. I don't know, but it's the double-minded double speak. You see this in politics today. You see this in ecumenism in a big way among Orthodox ecumenists. They say one thing, they do another. They'll say one thing to one group, they'll say another thing to another group. And we saw that, I think, in Vatican II's documents itself. I mean, I pointed out before, the document on the doctrine of the church in 13 and 14 seemed to be, from an Orthodox perspective, contradictory. 13 is talking, as it were, just to Roman Catholics and talking about that being the exclusivist ecclesiology. And then 14, I think it was 14, if I remember the numbers right, it's talking to non-Catholics, non-Roman Catholics, and it has almost a different ecclesiology, a different approach. And I've talked to other people that said that was intentional so that they can have basically talking points for different groups. So in ecumenism, there can be, and of course they style it as a kind of paradoxy, but it doesn't really, I don't think it pans out. I don't think it works as a paradox. But so do you think that that's accurate, or it's just a political way to avoid criticism? Or do you think that there really was a fear we're going to have a huge schism in Germany, we're going to lose all these bishops if we don't allow more leniency?
I think so, Father. Father, I think it's also just the priest shortage, because I've seen bishops. There's no mechanism for discipline in the Catholic Church, specifically because of the priest shortage. So a bishop will allow a priest to go rogue to a certain degree, especially in these moral issues. So they just don't have a warm body to fill that parish spot if they lose a priest. So if they've got a wacky priest who's doing gay marriage blessings and pride masses and rainbow flags in the church, let it go. Let it go. At least he's a body there. So
that's pretty tragic. I mean, do you think that like sober-minded Roman Catholics have that impression, or is that more of they would say you're being cynical?
No, I mean, bishops were allowing pedophile priests to, continue in ministry. Right. So, of course, they're going to let a Skittles priest, stay in place. So,
God help them. So, in terms of further innovation, one of the things that was pointed out by an old friend of mine who's who has a podcast on crisis. I think he's the head of the Crisis magazine. His name is Eric Sammons. He and I were together in pro-life work 30 years ago. But I saw something he had to say about this, and I thought it was quite good in terms of, I mean, I would agree with all three criticisms, and serious theological criticisms, probably not at all addressing that side of Catholicism that you're talking about. I don't know if he has any experience of it, frankly. I think that, or at least not, he tries to stay away from it. But he said, look, there's a total division and separation in this document between orthodoxy and orthopraxia. I mean, orthodoxy meaning here, small o, the proper teaching with regard to homosexuality, the proper teaching with regard to marriage, and orthopraxia, in other words, what they're actually doing on the ground and giving of the blessings. Obviously, the message is sent that the activity of homosexuals and their life as couples is blessable. And so you have a chasm between that. We already kind of mentioned that maybe that chasm exists on paper, but in reality, it's now they're bringing that to be more in unison. He also said between liturgy and life, because you have this artificial division. Well, we can't really do it liturgically. It's not a liturgical blessing, and yet they're doing it. And so in life, they're blessing it, but in liturgy, they're not. And so what's going on here? I thought liturgy was life. I mean, how do we have, like, again, it's like we have a schizophrenia or double-mindedness.
Yeah.
And then finally, he said there's the third separation or division is moral teaching from pastoral practice. kind of more of the same. What are your thoughts, Joseph? And jump in, Mark and Patrick.
I'll be quick. I see this comment in the in the chat. There, talking about Francis fires bishops. Well, let me give you an example. There was a pastor here in San Francisco who was doing gay marriage blessings. This is years ago, and the Pope, Archbishop Corleone, let it fly. He let it go. Now, when that priest showed up at a women's ordination conference, that was it. He was done. So, I mean, they're willing to wiggle on certain things, and other things they're not willing to wiggle on, especially any sort of allegiance to the Pope or obedience or women's ordination or illicit ordinations, anything like that. They're ready. And Eric Salmons, he's a good guy, and I interviewed him on my podcast, and he was when I was Catholic, and he's a good guy. But yeah, there's a lot of priests and bishops don't realize what's going on the ground, because a lot of this pro-gay stuff has been relegated to certain parishes and areas in the Catholic Church, like the Castro or West Hollywood or Chelsea in New York. And there's this crazy stuff going on. And like I said, bishops are willing to secede power in those certain areas because at least they got a priest that's willing to put up with all that stuff there. And, let's keep all the gay people in that ghetto down there. But, when you do that, it's gonna escape. And that's what we've seen in the Catholic Church. You just can't have all that stuff ruminate for decades and decades without it having any effect on the larger church, because those people, I mean, James Martin is a good example. He comes right out of that world. That's St. Ignatius in New York City, where they have a big full-time, gay ministry and all that stuff there. And when somebody escapes that world and reaches a place of prominence in the Catholic Church, like James Martin has done, watch out. Hold on. And that's what's happened. So they ignored it for too long, and now forget it. It's over. So
what about Patrick or Mark? You want to jump in?
Well, I think largely this issue is not one that radically calls into question the infallibility of the Pope, the way the Roman Catholic Church now understands it and defends the idea. Because ultimately, the positive teaching of this encyclical is that it positively forbids a priest from inferring or asking the intent behind a blessing to make sure it's used for a moral end. Now, this would be unthinkable in an Orthodox context, but ultimately it's a sort of discipline. Now, it's a discipline with direct import upon faith and morals, but what it comes down to it is that to the average Roman Catholic apologist even, they're going to say, well, disciplines are fallible. You could agree this discipline is prudent or not, pragmatic or not, effective or not, but it upholds the faith and moral teaching of the Roman Catholic Church on this issue. And it's sort of, you're playing a sort of epistemic game, which makes it where John the Baptist was literally murdered for doing the opposite of this, right? For inferring and asking and questioning the intent upon a couple, Herod and Herodias. And this document would actually positively forbid him from doing this, right? So it's where we have this document making a prescription for a discipline which is completely at odds with the apostolic deposit of faith. And I think this speaks to a larger issue. I have to admit, I'm not an expert on modern Roman Catholic controversies, modern Roman Catholic canon law, or anything like that. My interest in particularly the Roman West and the Orthodox Catholic East is largely in the first millennium. That's the book I've published with your press, Uncut Mountain Press, covers that, the rise and fall of the papacy. And so when you look at the first 1,000 years of church history, East and West, this sort of idea that disciplines are essentially irrelevant and they could be in error and we could just go, doesn't matter, is completely foreign to everyone's way of thinking until approximately the 860s and 870s. East and West, for example, you would have Pope Gelasius saying that Chalcedon stands or falls based upon if any point in that council is right or wrong. And so this idea that we could kind of slice and dice, that it's only about faith, it's only about morals, the disciplines could be wrong, the canons could be wrong if they're disciplinary and not dogmatic. And no one spoke in those terms. Just try to think about the Seventh Ecumenical Council on the issue of iconodulia. It's literally a council which dogmatizes a discipline of the faith, the venerate an icon, a physical movement. It's in an art form. It's the idea, and when they appeal to justification for the practice, they appeal to previous practice. They appeal to icons on the walls where previous ecumenical councils were held, hagiographies where the icons are venerated, and things like that. There's no idea whatsoever in anyone's mind, East or West, in the first 7 centuries of the church, that a discipline is something that, even if it's apostolic, is something that is irrelevant ultimately, right? We Orthodox Christians don't believe this, which is why we see the orthopraxy of a blessing and how you ask for a blessing and the intent behind the blessing is all highly relevant and not negotiable, because it's the way it's always been done. That is the way the church had approached all issues.
It's impossible to imagine this happening in Orthodoxy if we're going to be Orthodox. I mean, we're going to cease to be Orthodox. So, this kind of
impossible
game
to
playing
imagine, unless we start buying into heterodox ideas of what is dogmatic and non-negotiable to the Orthodox Christian. And that's why it's very important where we have to uphold our orthodoxy and our orthopraxy, because they're not something dichotomous and in opposition, or one's important and one's not. It's it's holistic. You need both of them.
Yeah.
And so
the way we would normally talk about it, I think, would be that there's the dogma and the ethos are inseparable. And so if the minute you depart from one, you're on the path, and you will very soon depart from the other. So the fact that we're talking about in practice there being a chasm between the two on the ground in Catholicism, and now they've come basically toward the practice, which is not in agreement with the dogma and with the phronema, the outlook, in a very sad and tragic way. They're more consistent now in on the ground, it seems. Not that all Roman Catholics by any means would agree with that or want that. I'm just saying that this is where things are headed. But because they departed and they did not sufficiently understand the departure from dogma once upon a time, the ethos was doomed. And now and it's vice versa. The more you depart from the ethos, the more the dogma will be dragged behind on its away from holiness.
As St. Augustine said, lex orandi, lex credendi, right? It's what we pray and what we worship and how we do things is what we believe. This is how he would argue in favor of the canonicity of certain books of scripture, how he'd argue in favor of his particular views, predestination, which is not what this is about. But the point is, he applied the principle. And so, of course, if you're going to be blessing a couple that's homosexual, ultimately speaking, that's going to have a tangible effect on the belief, because you cannot separate these things. And because unlike what a lot of apologists from the Roman Catholic side are saying, like, oh, well, people just, randomly get blessings all the time, crowds of people. This is not just random people. This is a couple. And there's no doubt as to what they're asking for to be blessed themselves as a couple. And so then this becomes an endorsement of what that couple is. Maybe not every specific thing that couple does. I mean, how could a priest know? But a priest will know one of those things, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is it's a homosexual couple. And so this sort of apologetic that, sadly and regrettably, even from a person in the Orthodox Church defending this, that, oh, well, you could bless people in their sin. Well, of course, we're all sinners. Whenever we approach for a blessing, it's not going to be from the vantage point of sinlessness. That's impossible. But the idea that you're going to be blessing a couple whose togetherness is a matter of sin is unthinkable. It was unthinkable.
So one of the first words out of the Lord's mouth when he was preaching was repent. And the way of life of every Orthodox Christian is a continual present. In other words, continual repentance. It's a stance. It's not a one-time event or a 10-time event. It's a whole way of life. It's a whole orientation, right? Repentance is an orientation to Christ. So when you're oriented away from Christ, because that's how you will be if you insist that God blesses this relationship, that's something that Scripture and the Fathers and church tradition for 2,000 years has said this is not blessed. This does not lead to the kingdom of God. This does not lead to union with God. Now you're standing and saying, no, it does. And now you're coming to the priest to get a blessing. So you're necessarily not repenting. You're necessarily not interested in repenting. I mean, it's the same thing with the question of trust. I mean, how can you say someone has faith? This is another question that comes up later. These people are faithful. That we're going to bless them to encourage their faith. Well, faith means trust, right? Faith means trust. So hang on one second.
And how is this realistically not an issue of good morals, right? It's only through a Pharisaical legalism that, well, it's the discipline's effect on the morals, and the discipline could be imprudent. The discipline could be, too practical and not idealistic enough, or whatever people could dream up. But this is why buying into this just faith and morals, disciplines could be anything and it doesn't matter. That's not how the church understands itself. It's not how they understood themselves, East and West, until the 870s, where regrettably then the West diverged on this question. And not surprisingly, they soon went into schism. It's very regrettable.
Father, this is also part and parcel of this squishy pastoral practice in Catholicism of accompaniment, because I spent decades around these gay parishes down in San Francisco, never saw conversion out of one of them, because their approach is accompaniment, which is to meet people where they are. To a certain degree, that's a good thing, but there needs to be progress along the spiritual route, and I never saw it. I saw people go into these parishes, get their marriage blessed, get their test tube babies, baptized, and all this stuff, and people would leave, but there were never, I've seen people have sex change surgeries in these parishes. There's no conversions that takes place because there's no challenge. They don't challenge these people. When you sing Over the Rainbow at their Pride Mass, there's no challenge there. This gay world that they've created in the Catholic Church is no different from the gay world on the Pride Parade. So it's a disaster.
So have they lost all sense of what it means to be healed? Is that the conclusion? Because if we're not healed, if we don't have examples of healing, if we don't have hope of healing, maybe that's one of the reasons why they just default with accompaniment, as you said.
Well, Pope Francis said it to a pre-sex abuse survivor, this man named Juan Carlos Cruz, who's on the Pontifical Council for the Protection of Minors, God forbid. He said to this man, you were born gay. God made you this way, and that's a good thing. So they don't believe that homosexuality is really a problem.
So it's health. It's already health. They're healthy as is.
Yeah. So I mean,
So
I had
salvation is so they've already in practice married. Sorry for the pun. They've married themselves to this theological outlook.
yes,
And if that's the case, there's no hope at all of healing.
yeah,
Because if you say sickness is health, then you're going to be sick forever.
yeah. And I don't care. I told Catholics this over and over again. I don't care what's written in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's not worth the paper it's written on. It's not followed. I don't care what's written there. It doesn't matter. It's moot.
So one of the things that I picked up from a previous conversation, and I'm quoting our guest here, Patrick Trulia, is, can we bless the context, the couple, without blessing that which takes place therein? And the way he put it was, we bless the meth lab, but we're not the making of meth.
The making of meth.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I thought that was pretty good, because this is what people are. There's Pope-splainers, as they're called. We're going to actually see a video or two, I think, in a minute here. Pope-splainers are saying, "Look, no, we're not doing that. That's a lie. It's not in the document. It's not there. You're not being honest."
I'm going to
go ahead, Patrick, and then Joseph.
Let me clarify it, because sometimes
I think a great answer to that is
hang on, Mark. We got issues with your Joseph. Right after Craig, go
read the document.
So yeah, in short, let me maybe say the same example, but so people get it even more clearly. It's blessing the abortion clinic, but not the abortions that happen inside. It's unthinkable. Yeah. It's satanic. It's evil.
Because the analogy is that the couple like is the external, like the couple is the external, the meth lab or the abortion clinic, and we're blessing the couple, their lives, et cetera, but not what they're doing on a daily basis as a couple engaged in sodomy.
And all that has been devised has been a theoretical workaround the obvious. And that's the point. Like, we know what the meth lab's for. We know what the abortion clinic's for. We know what the gay coupling is. There's you could make all the words in the world to say what you're doing is not what you're doing, but it doesn't matter. That's what's really happening.
What do you think first? We'll go to Mark and then up to Joseph. Go ahead, Mark. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
It's important for these Pope-splainers to know exactly what this document says under the blessings. And
he's coming in and out.
We've got problems with your connection. You're coming in and out, so we're not hearing you, Mark. Yeah, unfortunately. Well, let's see if Mark
comes back clear. We could get back. Yeah.
Go ahead, Go ahead, Joseph. Jump in on this point here if you like.
I could hear him. Oh, you want me to go ahead, Father?
Love.
Yeah, go ahead. We can't hear Mark.
So that's what we're looking to do with these blessings.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't hear Mark for most of what he said, but we'll try. Maybe it'll come back in a bit. Go ahead, Joseph, and then we're going to go on.
Sure. I kind of have anecdotal or practical experience in this area, but I mean, a priest that's going to be approached for a same-sex blessing is not going to be like a Bishop Strickland. He's going to be like a James Martin. So that sort of priest knows right away exactly what he's doing and what he's blessing. So again, I just think this is something that's been going on in the Catholic Church for years. The Vatican's catching up to what's happening in the parishes, and they're permitting it. So,
and are people just in denial then? I mean, all these trad Catholics are just in denial. Like, don't worry, fight the fight. It's all,
Well, you know what they used to tell me? They said, "Oh, Joe, you got to get out of San Francisco. This don't happen anywhere else." Well, hey, what was going on in San Francisco is now taking place in the whole Catholic Church. So, too bad.
Yeah. God help us. God help these people. Go ahead.
like I said, they ignored it for too long. There's been a very strong pro-gay movement within the Catholic Church for years. And it's just, they got the right Pope at the right time.
There's some that say that even the previous popes, although more orthodox, quote unquote, small o, in terms of doctrine, like Ratzinger, that they were also pretty consistently covering up a lot of this and ignoring it. As you said, they've been ignoring it too long.
Well, what about the weird homoeroticism in Catholic art, liturgical art? Catholics don't want to talk about this beyond Michelangelo. What's going on?
So this goes way back, though.
Well,
We're talking Renaissance.
I think so.
Yeah.
And this
one of the things we want to discover. Go ahead.
Well, like, you know, Father Stephen Bigham, who's an Orthodox art history scholar, observes is that the continuing derivations in Western art away from Orthodox canonical norms, which were shared East and West. Oriental Orthodox still have them, for example. So this was a universal canonical norms and art forms accompany theological drift. There's no doubt about it. And so what Joseph here is observing is something that scholarship observes as being highly relevant to Western art forms. Because again, it goes back to the same principle as St. Augustine. It's what we practice is what we believe. And sadly, this is something that hasn't happened overnight, but has really thoroughly soaked in really the whole Western intellectual tradition, particularly in the Roman Catholic Church.
This is something I really wanted to get into in this podcast, and I think future podcasts, to help those who are Roman Catholics who are, you know, wanting to go deeper and be faithful. Is the big question is this, as you said, it's not now, it's much deeper, but how deep does it go? I mean, can we go back, as you just went to the Renaissance? But if you follow the Orthodox line, of course, we're going back to the schism in terms of the roots. Like, you see a tree with great branches, but when did it begin its life? It was hidden in the ground as a seed for a number of years, and then it, you know, was a little tiny tree, and now we're at this massive thing called Catholicism, you know, billion whatever people, and in terms of just quantity, but also years that have passed, 1,000 years. When does it all begin? And this is something that, again, you said they don't want to go there. Well, many Roman Catholics don't even want to go here, where I think you have to go ultimately from the Orthodox perspective. So this is something hopefully will come out of this discussion. I think it's a really important question. Like, is this going to be the beginning of a journey toward orthodoxy for a lot of Roman Catholics? They're going to start to say, wait a minute, this is not 10 years or 100 years, but this goes really deep. Can it be the beginning? What do you think, Joseph? You just a year ago were still in Catholicism. You've done it recently.
I left in 2018. That was the three big events was McCarrick that year, the first Vaginal letter, and then the Germans started doing the same-sex blessings, and I said I'm done. So that's when I took off. And it's interesting. I'd wonder what you think, Father, because Peter Damian was right around 1054, and he was talking a lot about sodomy in the Catholic Church. So it was already an issue at that time. I think part of it has to do with clerical celibacy as well. I think when you get a bunch of men together without women, I think you're asking for problems. So
not always, because we do have monasticism going back to the very beginning. But the problem is that
true, Father.
We don't have the therapeutic program. If you just have men without spiritual therapy, in other words, the hesychastic ascetic life, then you can that'll happen with men and women. That's the real underlying problem. I think before the schism came to the surface, there must have been a fairly long incubation of an abandonment of the ascetic narrow path.
Yeah. In at least in Orthodoxy, you have the monastic celibates and the priests in the parishes. At least you have them to bounce off each other. And I see that just in my limited life as an Orthodox, I see the married priests interacting a lot with the hierarchy that is celibate, and that's a very good thing. But you don't have that in Catholicism.
Yeah.
And it's worth adding, it's not a majority by any sense, but about 10, 15, maybe even 20% of the bishops are widowers. So meaning they were married. The Metropolitan Rocor has a full-grown daughter, for example. And this is something studying church history existed east and west. Popes of Rome had children and wives. They didn't live together as man and wife anymore. They'd go to respective convents and whatnot. But this is something that existed east and west in the past, and it still exists within Orthodoxy today. It doesn't mean that we don't have scandals. We've had a recent metropolitan in the United States who had essentially a female concubine. Same stuff happens in the old world, but there does seem to be a sort of lack of an institutionally where there's whole wings of the church where everyone is homosexual. And so there is a very different ethos, even amongst the sins, sadly, that are practiced by some hierarchs, because people are sinful and people do fall and they fail.
Is Mark, can you hear us now? You back?
Yeah, I'm on another device. This might be better.
Oh, good.
You
So
sound better.
let's hear from you, because you've been deprived. And then we're going to jump into the next segment. Go for it.
I think it's critical when having an interpretation of this document to look at paragraph 31, blessings of couples in irregular situations and couples of the same sex, because that defines exactly what the Pope is looking to bless here. It's asking that these blessings are an expression asking God that he may grant that human relationships may mature and grow in fidelity to the gospel, and that they may be freed from their imperfections and frailties, that they may express themselves in an ever-increasing dimension of divine love. So as a couple hearing that, you're thinking, okay, we're supposed to mature and grow together, and we're supposed to have more and more divine love in our couple relationship.
Mm-hmm. And that's identity as that couple is this relationship, which is actually contrary to that communion and union with divine love. So how they don't believe that, but that's the traditional understanding. So are you saying basically that it's irreconcilable? Like they're implicitly recognizing the couple and the identity of the couple as harmonious with that pursuit?
Oh, darn.
Yep.
It was good for
Once again,
good connection
issues.
for a moment.
That's unfortunate.
Damn, darn.
Let's see if we'll have to move on until we get him again. I don't hear anything. Yeah, we had right before we went live. I think he and I both lost internet, and now we're coming to you via mobile phones. So that's probably what's happening.
So
We'll come
Audience,
back.
please
Hopefully,
pray for
Mark will
us.
come
Pray
back.
for the
Let me add.
some of the Pope's plainers, Father, have kind of said
Did I
that.
lose connection as well? Oh,
No, I can hear you, Father.
that's beautiful.
Some of the Pope's plainers have kind of said that maybe this blessing will create, an environment of conversion for a same-sex couple, that miraculously the Red Sea might part and they'll see the error of their ways.
Wouldn't you say, Joseph, that that's disingenuous, right? Both from your firsthand experience, as you were saying, this never occurred. But in what context do you expose people to a situation where it's essentially it's designed for them to fail and they're somehow going to improve?
Yeah.
Right? Would you drop off your kids at a place of ill repute and think they're going to turn out okay? No, right?
Exactly.
And so it speaks to the motivation ultimately for the apologetic. And I think this is, people think of apology as in you're almost saying sorry for something, but when we say apologetic, we're trying to explain and defend, the purpose of something. And I think Pope-splaining is a very good way of putting it, because the purpose is just to defend the paper infallibility of the Pope. The purpose is not to explain why this is actually good. No one really thinks it's actually good, right? There's going to be a couple videos we'll queue up where we're going to find the same people who are defending this now were opposing this same thing 2 years ago, right? So no one thinks this is actually good. The real issue is that they know it's bad, but the thing they think is good is the paper theoretical possibility of the Pope being infallible. And so that's what we're seeing really being defended. Father, you're back.
We're back. We're having problems. We lost all of our internet down here. Mark's not far from me, and we lost all of our internet, so we're on mobile phones. So this is the unfortunate. Let's see if we can get Mark back.
You're coming in good now, Father.
Okay, good. How about you, Mark? Are you back?
Yeah.
All right, try it once again. We want to hear from you. And then we're going to go on to the next section once we hear from you.
So in paragraph 38, the document gives an example of the prayer that could be said. And this prayer asks for peace, health, a spirit of patience in that relationship, dialogue, mutual assistance, but also God's light and strength to be able to fulfill his will completely. So as someone hearing this prayer, you're thinking, okay, I have to assist the other person. I have to grow in my love. I have to have good dialogue. I need to make this a strong relationship. That's what this prayer is asking for me. So when people say it's just blessing the individuals of that couple, no, it's actually blessing the relationship that couple has.
Absolutely. And as we were saying earlier, I think we got lost, is that it seems implicit that the people who are issuing this document are embracing them as a couple, encouraging them as a couple to continue their life together. And their identity as a couple is necessarily in this relationship, which is sinful, which is rejected by the gospel. So it's unbelievable the somersaults, logical somersaults people are doing to try to make this somehow fit in traditional Orthodox.
They're blessing the abortion clinic, but not the abortions.
Yeah,
that's all this is.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic. So let me bring back our slides, because I want to move on to another section which is going to be helpful. I think we've established pretty easily to establish this is a problem, right? This is not somehow consistent with Christian morality. And so I want to go into the examples. What does Catholicism teach is the response and responsibility of their faithful when the Pope errs? I think that's really essential, right? This is one of the big goals of this podcast today, is for all those who understand and see within Catholicism, this is a problem. This is an error. This is what the Pope is in error. So what do we do? And I think there are serious critics out there who are saying, yes, this is a grave error, but I don't know if they're consistent with Catholicism. They're Roman Catholics, but are they consistent with Roman Catholic dogmatic teaching? And I'm going to present here a number of quotations from popes and saints which say that when the Pope errs, we don't resist. Right? We don't resist. And then we can talk about it as we go. And then I'd like to look at what some people are saying today. We can look at those if we have time, who are justifying the Pope and how they're thinking. We don't have many examples of those who are criticizing, but they exist. They're out there. And then I want to talk a little bit about as from Orthodox tradition, what does an Orthodox Christian do when the bishop errs, the patriarch errs, even synods? We have false synods. We have the false synod of Curia before the Seventh Ecumenical Council. We have the false synod during the second millennium with regard to Catholicism. So what does the Orthodox tradition say? The Christian tradition, the first millennium as well for Roman Catholics. When you have an erring pope, we have two popes, and we have the expert with us. Patrick has written a book on this. We have two popes who had dogmatic errors and were would it be right to say condemned by ecumenical councils, or at least rebuffed?
Well, Honorius was particularly condemned, and Pope Vigilius was deposed.
Yes. So what did they do in the first millennium when popes err? I think it's an extremely important question for all Roman Catholics today. Let's go to our first slide. And this is the response of Ignatius Loyola, famous doctor and Roman Catholic saint, founder of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And he said, we ought to ever to hold as a fixed principle that what is white that I see, I will believe to be black, if the superior authorities in Rome define it so. And go ahead and jump in at every slide if anybody wants to comment on this, because I think it's important. Well, to us as Orthodox Christians, that just sounds unbelievable, but it's true, right? We're not misquoting anybody here.
It's cult programming.
Yeah. So how because they've invested in the person of the Pope of Rome infallibility, is that why they believed you have to do this, or how does it? What do you think?
Obedience above anything, blind obedience. Blind.
So blind obedience, that's extremely important for us as well as Orthodox today. We're getting told the same kind of papal approach to some of our bishops. We have to be blindly obedient. Clearly not.
This passage, I can't speak to the context of the passage because I haven't read it before, but it's two things come to mind for me. One would be how this obvious confusion that you see white and you're told it's black and you believe it's black. The spiritual teaching of the church, like we read in the Life of St. Anthony by St. Athanasius, is that the demons sow confusion, right? So if you have to believe something, but in the process it's creating tons of confusion, makes you have to ask yourself, what spirit is the origin of this? Is this the spirit of God or the spirit of a demon? And so that's one thing I think
the fact is
we need to be mindful of when we see stuff like this. And it seems like to be the inspiration of George Orwell's 1984 with doublethink, right? You believe 2 + 2 = 5. You know it's 4, but you really got to believe it's 5 because Big Brother said so. It's so again, if that's a real quote, that's pretty terrifying.
So here's a contemporary apologist who's telling Roman Catholics they have to be obedient, and so he's following in their.
We owe submission to the magisterium. Paragraph 10 of the doctrinal commentary on concluding formula Professio Fide, which I also read on this channel, you can go and watch, states, the third proposition of the Professio Fide states, moreover, I adhere with religious submission of will and intellect to the teachings which either the Roman Pontiff or the College of Bishops enunciate when they exercise their authentic magisterium, even if they do not intend to proclaim these teachings by a definitive act.
So this is one of the things that many people say, only the infallibility is only when it's a particular stated
ex cathedra, faith and morals.
Ex cathedra, right? So he's saying, well, no, actually, it's not the magisterium, the Pope, and the doctrine of the faith. You have to be obedient, whether it's infallible or not.
Teachings are, however, an authentic expression of the ordinary magisterium of the Roman Pontiff or of the College of Bishops, and therefore require religious submission of will and intellect. They are set forth in order to arrive at a deeper understanding of revelation, or to recall the conformity of a teaching with the truths of faith, or lastly to warn against ideas incompatible with these truths or against dangerous opinions that can lead to error. I was in a texting conversation.
Okay, so according to this apologist, then we have to, it's kind of ironic that it's of course saying that it's going to be teaching the faith, but here they're not, and everybody kind of recognizes it, and yet they're still doubling down and say, look, I actually have another video, and I think it's even more apropos. Hang on. This is for the layman.
Have a public opinion that they blast outward to mass media.
Talking about laymen. What should laymen do? What should be the response of laymen? And it's very instructive here. And again, this is not just for Roman Catholics. There are some Orthodox who are also very mistaken about the Orthodox stance with regard to episcopal authority in when it errs, when it's in error? What do we do as a layman? Now, listen to what he has to say. I think it's very pertinent to the discussion.
Media and social media. I think the first point around this is that the document wasn't written for the laity. It was written for bishops and priests. It wasn't written for me. Because as a laity, I can't do anything with what the teaching is in the document in the first place. So I don't really need to have an opinion, especially not one that I blast out to people. So I said, of course, we can't help but have an inward opinion. Although from my reading, it seems like we're called to not have an opinion at all about it and just trust the church.
There you go.
God,
Joseph, what do you think about that?
Oh, he's crazy. It makes me very, very angry, Father. Because I'm also a pre-sex abuse survivor, and this is kind of what we were told. Let us handle it. Let us handle it. We'll handle it. We'll take care of Father. Oh yeah, they took care of it. Okay, this is crazy. This is bad. This is the telling the laity, pray for us. Shut up.
Patrick
Oof.
or Mark, if you can hear us.
No, it's in a whole other planet to me, Father. I can't situate this line of thinking with how the church has functioned historically, which is the only thing I'm expert in. And as for attending church every Sunday, it's just not what I see in the Orthodox Church. It's just bizarre to me.
If Mark can hear us, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think that what he's saying is consistent with St. Ignatius of Loyola's quote. I think it's consistent with Vatican I and consistent with the general teachings of the doctors of the Catholic Church on this issue.
Let's go to another one.
Yeah. Catholics need to pray, give us money, your boys, and shut up. That's what you do.
God have mercy. So Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, am I saying his name right? Bellarmine. He says the following. He's a saint in Catholicism. He says, if the Pope errs by commanding vices or forbidding virtues, then the church must believe that vices are good and virtues bad, unless one wants to sin against conscience. Again, just total alien to Orthodox Christians. I can't imagine anybody saying this. And if anybody did say this about bishops in the Orthodox Church, they would be laughed at, and that nobody would pay attention to them. To this degree. Now, are they just rhetorically trying to make a point, absolute blind obedience, or do they actually believe what they're saying? I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Is this a rhetorical device, or is this actually like they believe you must do this? You must believe that vices are good, or is this a way of just saying you must be blindly obedient and don't question? Maybe both. I don't know.
I do know St. Augustine warned, and I forget which paragraph in the Handbook of Faith, Hope, and Love, but he says there's a real danger where a time will come where people will think what is sinful is virtuous and what is virtuous is sinful. And so I think this obviously is an age-old human problem that he perceived it in the 5th century, but it's something that's become sadly a reality in the Latin West.
This is from Innocent III, Pope of Rome, his consecration sermon. So when he became the Pope, I guess, 1200, not long after the schism. So this again points to, I think one of the points of this live stream today is, when does this begin? When does this whole problem begin? He says, every cleric must obey the Pope, even if he commands what is evil, for no one may judge the Pope. I mean, it's hard to believe this was said in 1200, but we have a reference here. Rome has spoken. The limits of papacy, authority, and autonomy in the church, Crossroad, 1987. So is it possible in 1200 that this was stated? Are we already, Patrick, are we already that devolved from conciliarity?
Well, sadly, this is the application of an idea with a local application that began in the 6th century. In the Pseudo-Sammachian forgeries, the statement is made that that essentially the Pope can only be judged by God. The context of this statement was essentially to the Ostrogothic king, so that way they could say, you can't force us to depose the Pope because it's not in the authority of this synod to depose him. It should be noted that when a ecumenical council deposes a bishop, they speak with the authority of the Holy Spirit. So it's actually like Matthew chapter 18 states, where 2 or 3 meet in my name, I am with you. And the context of that is church discipline, right? Not just prayers or whatever. It's about actual church discipline, if you read that chapter of the scripture. So the idea that the Pope could only be anathematized by God is an issue that actually makes sense in as much as a patriarch would have to be deposed by an ecumenical council. This is why when we've, in the Orthodox Church, had patriarchal depositions, they need the other patriarchs to sign up on them. They need a pan-Orthodox consensus. And this is also what we've seen with the deposition of patriarchs in the First Millennium Church, like Nestorius, for example, or Dioscorus, who were deposed by an ecumenical council. And that deposition was seen as binding because God exercised it through the council. But what we see applied, at least in that quotation in the year 1200, is without the context of the church's disciplinary authority, just putting the Pope above the law, per se, where just he can't be judged for anything. And that was not the understanding of the early church. It wasn't the understanding of those who wrote the pseudo-Samachian forgeries, which essentially started at least coining the terms that conceptually became what we saw there, Father.
In more recent times, Pope Pius the Ninth, in response to Roman Catholic bishops' assertion that his pronouncements could not be deemed infallible without the consent of the bishops as witnesses of tradition, it was recorded in the bishop's diary that he said, "Witnesses of tradition, there is only one. That is me. I am tradition." And it's cited in this book below, August Bernard Hassler, How the Pope Became Infallible. So again, I'm not saying 100% that's what he said, but this is witnessed to by somebody who claims that he did say that. That would not be inconsistent with the other quotes we've read. And
it speaks to the ethos of Vatican I. You could say, well, this is not an ex cathedra statement, so it's a passing comment recorded in a diary. It wasn't a teaching to the whole church, et cetera, et cetera. We could get into the Pope's explaining. But if we look at, papal infallibility is defined by Vatican I, this gives you a kind of context as to what was the thought process behind doing that. And it's, as you point out, Father, very disconcerting.
Sounds like Fauci. I am the science.
Yeah, maybe he's inspired. Maybe, he was Roman Catholic, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's Italian.
Well, there's a spirit behind these things.
The next pope after him, Pope Pius X, the Pope is not only the representative of Jesus Christ, but he is Jesus Christ himself.
Oh boy!
So that when the Pope speaks, we have no business to examine.
Oof.
I've heard this a number of years ago, and this is quoted in the July 13, 1895 issue of the Catholic National. So there you go. There's the source.
Well, it's just, Father, how do we understand the Council of Chalcedon examining a saint's tome, right? Saint Leo the Great is a saint, right? But they examines what he had to say. How do we understand the Fifth Ecumenical Council examining the Orthodox statements of Pope Vigilius versus his not attendance to the council and then deposing him? How do we understand the Sixth
People are
Ecumenical?
ignorant of this, Patrick. People have no clue of church history. They don't understand what happened.
It's
in
just
church
not
history.
how the early church operated. It's so foreign from. It's not like we're picking one example. It's how everything operated for 1,000 years, East and West. It is unbelievable.
This attitude trickles down to the pastoral level because you have en persona Christi, where I don't think that's something in Orthodoxy where the priest takes the place of Christ. And St. Francis of Assisi, there's a famous quote from him: if he saw an angel and a priest, he would bow before the priest first.
That's true. That's also quoted by Orthodox saints.
Is it okay? So I think there's a hyper reverence for priests in Catholicism, and I think that's why you had such a problem with sex abuse, because people didn't want to snitch on a priest or say anything bad about the priest, because the priest is in the place of Christ, and you honor the priest above anything.
We do talk about in Greek sto topo και typo to Christou, in the place and the type of Christ. That is said about the bishop and also about the priest, but certainly not as in any way some infallible source. He doesn't take the place of Christ. He's in the place of Christ. He doesn't take the place. That's very different, isn't it? That's like a vicar. We have a vicar because Christ is no longer with us. But it's very clear that, lo, I am always with you until the end of the age. The Orthodox have never imagined that Christ is somehow absent and needs somebody else to take his place. But to be in the place is more of it's a typology, and it points to Christ. It's supposed to point to Christ, not take his place.
Yeah. Now, in Orthodoxy, because I know in Catholicism, when the bishop ordains a priest, the priest is like fundamentally changed in a certain way, that the priesthood can never really be removed from him. But is that also in Orthodoxy as well? Okay.
No, not my understanding. Look, the priest has a role and a function, and he exists within that context. When he departs from that context, that role ceases to exist. I mean, it makes no sense outside of that context.
Okay.
So we never had the teaching of medieval Catholicism where there's like an indelible mark. Yeah, and he goes, now he's a schismatic, now he's a heretic, but he's still doing the divine liturgy somehow.
Yeah, they have, the Catholics always say a priest forever. You hear that all the time, you know. And
but not relationally. Okay. I mean, it can't be a priest forever in terms of being in the place and type of Christ if he's no longer in the Eucharistic synaxes, right? If you depart from the Eucharistic synaxes, you become a heretic or you become a schismatic, or you no longer point to Christ because you're a philanderer or you're a heretic. I mean, then all that just ceases. It's like people don't. There are presuppositions to the priesthood. There are presuppositions to everything, and they ignore those presuppositions. They only look at the let's say the ideal, and it's got to be both and, right, Patrick? Anything to add?
It's got to be what's practical, what the church has always done. I think at a larger level, there needs to be an application of consensus. So meaning it's not just what the bishops want, it's not just what the priest wants, it's not just what the laity wants. It's a organic whole. This is what we see the canons talk about, what the pan-Orthodox councils talk about, like Constantinople 1848. There needs to be a symphony between everyone in the church. That's the ideal.
Mark, can you hear us?
Yes.
If you want to add, jump in. Don't wait for me. Go ahead, jump in. I don't know when you're hearing us and when you're not.
The Orthodox would follow the words of Christ, who said, I leave you the Holy Spirit who will lead you into all truth. Whereas the Catholic dogma since the schism has been I will lead you the Pope who will lead you into all truth. And that's how the Pope is taking the place of the Holy Spirit. We see this according to that last Pope that you quoted. But he also takes as he has the ultimate truth in whatever he says is
so John
true,
Bosco,
false.
a famous saint of the 19th century, considered a doctor by the papacy, which is quite it means he's trustworthy doctrinally. The Pope is God on earth. Jesus has placed the Pope higher than the prophets and than John the Baptist, than all the angels. Jesus has put the Pope on the same level as God himself. I can't believe people actually said this. I mean, we have these quotations. They're from people who've done the research. There's actual.
They say it now.
I can't believe people arrived to say such things. It's so outlandish to me as an Orthodox Christian. I don't know.
We don't say that about any of our bishops.
Yeah.
Never have.
Yeah, Jose
You would
Jose
never find a
Maria.
statement like this in the early church anywhere.
No,
Yeah,
never such a statement.
Yeah,
Go
Jose
ahead.
Maria Escriva, the founder of Opus Dei, said some stuff like that, where his Trinity was sort of, God first, Our Lady, and then the Pope. So
Catherine of Sienna, also
Oh, boy.
great venerated saint. She says, "He who will be disobedient to Christ on earth, who stands in the stead of Christ in heaven, will not," I think she's referring to the Pope there, "will not share in the fruit of the blood of the Son of God. Even if he," the Pope, "were an incarnate devil, we ought not to raise up our heads against him, but calmly lie down to rest on his bosom."
She also said that about priests as well.
Yeah, it's. I have another statement. This is letter 311 in the Editio Princeps, published 1500 by Aldus Montelius. She writes, "He who distances himself from him, that's God, or acts contrary to this vicar who holds the keys to the crucified Christ is foolish. Even if he were the devil incarnate, I must not lift up my head against him. But I wish us to place our heads in the lap of Christ in heaven out of affection and love, and of Christ on earth who serves in his stead, on account of the reverence the blood of Christ to which he holds the keys." And so we could see this is an idea actually she said in other places, which is why this creates confusion, slight variations, because she says similar ideas in a lot of places, like in her letter to Signori Florence in 1376. But you see it right there, even the devil incarnate. So it's a very exaggeratory language, but language she does repeat.
And I think the pre-sex abuse scandal can be traced right back to this sort of mentality, because people it's grinded into you from a child that there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church, and you need to be under the Pope, and you need to be in the Catholic Church. So even people who were abused were reticent to say anything against the Catholic Church because their soul was in jeopardy. So it keeps that kind of mentality keeps people silent.
Yes.
I just want to pose any Roman Catholic viewers, what is the spirit behind a statement like this, considering no one in the first 1,000 years of church remotely spoke this way, remotely thought this way? And so if we have people starting to defend the papacy with such language and such ideas, if there's even a kernel of truth in them, why are these things not discussed beforehand for no short period of time? I mean, the English language as we speak it today did not even exist 1,000 years ago. I mean, it's an incredible amount of time. And so I think people just need to understand that this is just a later idea that's grown over centuries, and it's not original, it's not apostolic.
Okay, our final card before we see a video or two, and then talk about that. Some other responses from Catholic apologists, and it is this whole question of the proper response. So we saw what authorities in Catholicism say you must do. We actually see that, strangely, some of the more traditional-minded aren't doing that very well. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but some more traditional-minded say, no, we can't follow the Pope. We must not follow the Pope, and they're resisting it. So I wonder how they're reconciling matters. They're probably cherry-picking from among their saints and the tradition. And then I show you a video too, and then I want to talk about what the Orthodox response would be and I mean, it's happened many, many times, and we don't have the problem that the Roman Catholics would have, because we don't have this whole ideology and mythology and exaltation of the Pope. We don't have anybody like that in the Orthodox Church, and that's often criticized from Roman Catholicism. Right? They say that's your problem, but right now, is that really our problem, or is it in fact now a serious problem for Catholicism? Because when the Orthodox response for 2,000 years, again and again and again, has been that, for instance, various false councils, many heretical patriarchs, archbishops, bishops, synods, and yet the church persists. The church does not fold, and And the faithful play an important role. As Patrick mentioned, the 1848 encyclical of the patriarchs to the Pope, responding to the Pope, said, it's the faithful, it's the laymen, the faithful, who always want to be unchanged, the same yesterday, today, and forever, who are the protectors, the guardians of the faith. That's from the patriarchs of I think it was 3 patriarchs or maybe 4, but of the Constantinople,
4 patriarchs and 3 of their synods. I think only Alexandria's synod didn't explicitly sign on, but they probably
far from exalting themselves or supposing that they have an infallible authority. They're saying, look to the Pope of all people. They're saying it's actually the faithful who saved the day always throughout 2,000 years of church history.
Bishop Sheen said something like that the faithful would save the Catholic Church. And I'm like, I'm not into that. That's a big responsibility on the faithful to clean up the mess that these corrupt people have left. And the Catholic Church doesn't work that way. It's a top-down organization. There's very little that the laity can do, except don't put money in the basket.
Yeah, well, that's a big thing, though. They can vote with their money, and so
exactly.
I think the faithful need to take that more seriously, no matter their communion, because that is something where we do have major power. Is we could vote with our money. They
don't. They won't do it. They won't. They give. They give. I mean, there's several dioceses. The one that I live in, San Francisco, has declared bankruptcy. San Diego, Santa Rosa, they're all declaring bankruptcy because of the sex abuse. People still give. They still give. It's a cult. So
well, and here's the thing: they have the saints, the Roman Catholic saints that we just mentioned, very, very important for the last couple hundred years, going back to the 1200s, to support that view that they should just keep their head down and follow, and they have no business worrying themselves, as we heard from the apologist earlier. Yeah. I think that's a reflection of the problem with this ecclesiology. I mean, this is a dogmatic question ultimately, right? Because it goes back to our experience and our vision of the church, of what is the church, who is Christ ultimately.
I could not get the ear of a bishop. I had to go out and park myself out in front of the cathedral when they were doing ordinations to say, hey bishop, remember me? They just don't care. It's a top-down organization, and they just don't care.
So let's hear 1 or 2 more contemporary apologists. Now we have this is very interesting. We'll listen to this apologist. He was on your show.
Sure. The church is the guardian of the deposit of faith, the capital T tradition, and it can't change that. Now it can obviously recognize and through theology have true development of doctrine that is rooted in the essence of what the deposit of faith. So things aren't changing, but they are truly growing, and you're coming to a better understanding of the corpus of what's in Revelation. There's that.
So that's very interesting. Patrick, would you like to comment on that?
It's I really don't have a comment on that. I'm sorry, Father. Not quick enough thinker.
So the development of doctrine is what he's talking about. And it somehow grows. He says it grows, and we have a better understanding of it, but it doesn't change. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting perception. Now that it leaves room for this kind of innovation, right? And I want to talk about this idea that you can innovate in such a basic pastoral way, which seems to basically undo the pastoral practice. I mean, they said we innovate, so they're undoing the pastoral practice that previously, and they're innovating. And methodologically, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Methodologically, they're doing something they've never done before, and yet it's not going to affect the doctrine. And I think the development of doctrine idea opens them up to this kind of innovation, and then they baptize it as growth and better understanding, but not change. I think this is
what I could comment on that, though, is St. Vincent de Lorenz says, should doctrine develop? And he says, well, much in every way, but, with the same meaning and the same idea that's conceptually the same. So what he's talking about is like linguistic developments.
Is what development?
Like linguistic developments. So for example, Yeah, so like the term hypostasis has changed meaning in most contexts, not all, by the way, because it was clarified what do we mean by the term hypostasis in a given context. So, like in the Council of Nicaea, they conflate ousia with hypostasis, person with essence. And later, because of the Cappadocian Fathers picking up upon what earlier theologians, Origen, for example, St. Dionysius the Areopagite, the doctrine, and St. Hippolytus, by the way, of the doctrine of the particular hypostasis. So now when we speak of hypostasis, now we know we mean a divine person who shares the singular divine essence. So there's 3 hypostases and 1 ousia, right? And so this is not something that is new, because we could find this in the apologists in the 2nd century. We could find this in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century theologians before Nicaea. So it's not a new idea, but the clarification, the theological terminology was new, or at least new in some respects. And so that is a result of development. Another example would be, for example, the kind of art forms and veneration practices of those art forms, how we do iconodulia, right? And so art has slowly developed over time. It looks differently and things like that. Maybe the way we venerate the art could change in given context, but what hasn't changed is that there's always been Christian art and it was always venerated, right? And so I think when we see development from the Orthodox vantage point, it's, as St. Vincent de Lérens says, that there's real progress, not the alteration of the faith, right? We're not seeing something new. We're not seeing something different. We're not seeing something that's conceptually different. We can't go from people believing the Theotokos had original sin, which we see explicitly in writings of fathers, like St. Augustine, St. Fulgentius, and then get to, well, no, she's immaculately conceived, right? Like, you can't do that. You could have clarifications as to what we mean by certain words. Orthopraxy improved over time based on spiritual disciplines and saints that have had success doing things in certain contexts. But what we don't have is an alteration of the faith. But what we see in the Roman Catholic apologist tool belt is we could get from the Pope of Rome. I'll use St. Martin from the 7th century as an example, explicitly deny that he has direct jurisdiction over Jerusalem. Doesn't even conceive of it. If there's anyone on earth that would know about papal direct jurisdiction, you would hope it's the Pope, right? So you get a saint in both our communions who's a Pope of Rome say, I don't have the ability to ordain a new bishop of Jerusalem. Then you go 6 centuries later, well, less than that, 4 or 5 centuries later, and you have a Pope of Rome ordaining a new bishop of Jerusalem. You get another couple centuries after that, in absentia, he ordains a new bishop of Alexandria, where they never even stepped foot in Alexandria, in Egypt. They were kicked out because that crusade failed. And so you have doctrinal development now get from where popes of Rome have no clue, never even heard of the idea, have no understanding of the concept, but somehow the seed is there, though they have no understanding of the concept. And over time, it developed into, we have a whole new concept. But how antithetical is that from St. Vincent de Lérens to saying that there's no alteration in the faith, right? There's clearly an alteration. And so what, sadly, what Newman and what has now he's canonized in the Roman Catholic Church, and this document, which explicitly defends and affirms doctrinal development, now I don't see how they have any way of saying this is not a dogma of the Roman Catholic Church. That's this encyclical endorses doctrinal development. You have now, as a matter of Roman Catholic dogma, that's how theology works. And this is completely foreign to St. Vincent de Lérens. It's completely foreign to Floratsky, to Dimitri Staniloy, to modern Orthodox that have commented on this issue. It just shows you how far we have grown apart since the schism.
Go ahead, Joseph. You want to say something?
I was thinking when you were talking, is that I remember when, well, I don't remember, I wasn't really there, but I remember when the Catholic Church instituted all these liturgical innovations with turning the priest around, communion in the hand, and all this stuff. And faith and belief in the real presence just collapsed. So I think with this innovation in terms of pastoral practice, the church didn't change its teaching on the real presence, and supposedly they're not teaching, changing their teaching on marriage. But with this pastoral innovation, you're just going to see, I think, belief in traditional marriage collapse. Although in Catholicism, they did a survey, Pew did a survey of young Catholics, and you already got 80% who approve of homosexuality. So I think the older generation is behind that. But I think
one's saying that Pope Francis.
On that. I'm sorry,
I think this innovation is people. I think you saw the same thing with Obergefell. People follow the law, or people follow what they see. They see, a same-sex couple on top of a wedding cake registering at Target, and happily taking pictures in front of wherever, a church or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And after Obergefell, approval of same-sex marriage has skyrocketed. So people are just going to approve of what looks normal and familiar. So I think, this is a psyop. It's brainwashing.
It's total, utter secularization. Utter secularization. Go ahead.
It's worth pointing out.
Quick, and then real quick, because I want to get ahead and open up for questions before we get too late. Go ahead.
It's just worth pointing out real quick. It's you don't want to zero in only on homosexual couples. The same is true of cohabitating heterosexual couples. And this is also endorsed by the same document and earlier documents that allowed for the communing of such individuals. And so this appears to be something that it's just part of a broad, slippery slope collapse of moral values.
Mark, can you hear us? Let's see. No, Mike. His mic is off.
Move on.
All right.
That Pope Francis has, liberty to tinker with that or to add anything to the deposit of faith. Sure. But now we're dealing with lowercase t tradition in the laws of the church. And the church is a true community. The church is a true kingdom. And kingdoms need laws to be governed with, properly, with propriety and order. So because the church is a kingdom and it needs laws, there has to be somebody that says, okay, well, this law is defunct. It's no longer good for our times. It no longer serves a proper purpose. It's no longer intuitive. So therefore, we don't need to have it anymore. So we're going to change this law. And this is a lowercase t tradition thing where, the Pope Francis has changed in a certain sense or developed the law of blessings where now.
There you go. It's right there. He's changed and developed the law of blessings. Anyone comment on that? Is that something that could happen?
The quote St. Vincent, the whole church ought in the course of ages and centuries to increase and make much and vigorous progress, but yet only in its own kind. That is to say, in the same doctrine, in the same sense, and in the same meaning. Right? So you change a law, you change a discipline. It should be because you're trying to do things the same way, but better. This is clearly not what's happening here.
Yeah.
Now he's parsed out, well, here are these liturgical or quasi-liturgical blessings, and we're not going to be giving those to homosexual unions or couples because those things are not good. And part of the definition or part of what makes a liturgical blessing possible or quasi-liturgical blessing possible is that the thing being blessed must be good. It must be of God. But you can do these spontaneous, organic, pastoral blessings where you're just praying for God's grace to descend upon people and to purify them and to purify ultimately their relationship and make it more Christ-like. And this is, I don't think that's a weakness of having, a pope. It's a good thing.
So there you go.
It's just disingenuous. No one really believes that. Just be honest. No one really believes that.
Well, and so go ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't either. It's rather bizarre. I love Dave, but it's bizarre.
No one believes that. Individual people could go to a priest of blessing for these things. The issue is the couple. How could the couple do that in that context? It's just impossible.
Okay. Another slice from the present. Let's see. We did that one. Did we do this? I don't think we did this. This is from the same Roman Catholic.
You know, we're
model.
talking about like, well, I don't understand why the church has taken this tack. Why has it done this? Well, I mean, ultimately, I don't really need to understand it because I'm yet a lowly layman, and this is, you know, the reigning supreme vicar of Christ on earth, and you know that's part and parcel of my faith.
So
Scriptures say, discern the spirits.
yeah, it's tragic to hear that. I mean, as we know through church history, when doctrinal matters are at stake, the entire body is co-responsible. We bear one of those burdens. We all become responsible. There are many monastics who are laymen, they're not ordained, have been crucial. St. Maximus the Confessor, for instance, or many of the saints who came down out of the Palestinian monasteries during the crisis after the Fourth Ecumenical Council, or many other examples where it was the faithful, the monks and the laymen who saved the day. They did not say, "Oh, I don't have to understand. I don't understand my faith. I don't understand anything. I just follow after blindly." This blind obedience is a curse upon the church. It's never been a part of church. We have to know our faith. We have to give a confession of our faith, and many times, I mean, it's rare you have the layman being the leader of heresy. It's almost always among the hierarchy or the theologians, the so-called theologians, which are not theologians at all. And if it wasn't for the monastics who are laymen, there would be Orthodoxy would have been lost in many other places throughout church history. So it's really tragic to hear this mentality. It's just so foreign to proper Christian outlook.
I think when a civilization or a community begins to break down, I think a lot of people dig in their heels. I saw this in San Francisco during the AIDS crisis, because it was like so much death. And even at the time I was thinking, this might be a good impetus for reevaluation. But people didn't do that. They became more entrenched. And I think the gay community, then you saw in the 90s this proliferation of all these subgroups and genres where identity became very, very solidified. And I think you've seen this in Catholicism too, with trads and setties and all this stuff. And people have really just become intransigent, even despite everything that's going on around them, because they're scared, they're afraid.
Yes,
and I think when people get scared, they don't want to look at the truth. So,
Mark, you have anything to add before we keep losing you? Can you hear us?
I'm back with you, but I need to listen into where you are.
Okay. Well, we're basically looking at some apologists and their response, because I think it's helpful to put in the context. We've seen what authorities say: total blind obedience to the Pope. Now we hear similar apologists, but we're also looking at church history, and we're seeing the response is not blind obedience. Has never been blind obedience. There are presuppositions. One has to know the faith. And do we want to see Mr. Lofton, or is it just is it going to be?
I do. Come on, let's do it.
You want to see the? All right. So this is
Mr. Lofton.
This is Mr. Lofton when he was against the German same-sex couple blessing, and then we're going to hear him defending the Pope after that.
Ceremony must differ from a church wedding ceremony in terms of
reading the
words
document.
and signs, and should explicitly, now here's the kicker, reinforce the love, commitment, and mutual responsibility in the couple's relationship as an act of blessing. As I said, some people disguise certain things in very cunning ways, and I have been hammering home, here's how they're going to try to sell it. They're going to try to...
This is the tragedy for Mr. Lofton is the exact same thing happened in Germany happened now from the Pope. So they're selling it and you're buying it.
Oh,
They sell it as, well, we're
he
not
disguises things in cunning ways.
in anything disordered in this union. We're just blessing whatever good is found in this union.
That's exactly what we're hearing right now, is it not? Am I missing
Lord.
something? He said about
Hey,
the
just-
way they're going to do it, the way they're going to deceive people, the way they're going to, get it, pull it over on us is that we're not really blessing sin. We're just blessing. Isn't that exactly what they're saying,
Oh,
right?
dear.
Now about the papal blessing?
Disguising
Interest-
evil in cunning ways.
Yeah. Interesting pause, Father. So interesting video pause.
Commitment,
Okay.
friendship. They're just blessing the good found there, not the bad. You see the way that
Oh,
they're going to try to couch
I don't know.
it
Can
in
you all
the
hear? It's a little hard to
see
hear.
him couching it
Mm.
in just that way.
We hear enough.
And you're probably familiar with what my response has been to that, which is exactly what the magisterium actually said in response, as we'll look at here in a moment. My response has always been, you can't isolate any good that you find, such as fidelity and commitment. You can't isolate them from the context in which they are found. We can speak of
Apparently you can.
commitment, fidelity, friendship, isolated, objectively speaking, these are goods, right? But we live in reality. We don't live in the world of ideas, Plato's ethereal realm of ideas. We live in reality, where these things take place in concrete contexts.
I just
And
said that.
you can't divorce those things that are good in and of themselves from the context in which they're found.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael, for
Oh
the
my gosh.
criticism of the papal document. Now he's going to defend the papal document. Here we go.
About blessings for couples of the same sex. So that's what we need to focus on in this stream. Are we talking about blessing the couple itself, or blessings for the persons of the couple? I think the context is pretty clear in the document, but unfortunately, most people did not read the document. They just saw that language in paragraph 31, or perhaps the header there for section 3 of the document that is titled Blessings of Couples in Irregular Situations and of Couples of the Same Sex. They see that and they think, oh, that must mean the object of the blessing is the gay union itself.
Exactly.
And that is why a lot of people in the media just kind of ran with Pope approves of blessing of his. The blessing is for the persons of the couple, not of the couple itself, not of the union
Oh,
itself.
come on.
In addition to that, I want to provide and go over with a short catechism.
So there you go. So
Yeah,
So it is
completely,
not-
completely
ahead.
contradicts himself. And if you listen to his he did an interview recently on this subject, that he literally contradicts the very rationale of his critique in the video we just saw before this one. It's just incredible, and it speaks volumes. I'll just say it's the nicest thing. It speaks absolute volumes.
it's tragic.
If it's the blessing of a couple, how is it not the blessing of a couple? I'm confused.
Yeah, the document
Well,
says
well,
blessing of same-sex couples. Doesn't say individuals in same-sex couples.
I think Michael Lofton wearing the debate shirt from the first video should debate the Michael Lofton wearing a very similar shirt in the next video.
I think
I- Go ahead,
Catholicism. I think Catholicism eventually causes mental illness. It does. I don't mean to be smart, but it does. It really. It did.
Well,
with
if
me.
it's not healing, the persons, if you end up teaching things that are going to lead people to spiritual sickness, then that's not a radical conclusion.
You try to rationalize this stuff in your head, and it literally drives you crazy. Eventually.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, it's phenomenal and he's just one of many, unfortunately, who are doubling down and saying no, nothing to see here, including a few very few, thank God, Orthodox online. And you got to wonder if you know, did they become Orthodox? How did they end up in these ideas that they're identifying this and saying there's nothing to see here, nothing to see here. It's perfectly good. Everything's fine. They have a schism in their outlook between dogma and ethos and orthopraxia and orthodoxia,
Well,
which we talked about earlier.
I think these professional Catholics too, as I call them, I mean, they're invested, so they have to, uphold the status quo. I think people who aren't professional Catholics that have real jobs, that are Catholic, I think they just kind of ignore this stuff and hope it goes away. And I think they're always hopeful that the next pope will clean it all up. I try to explain to them that the majority of the people, in the dicastery that'll, be part of the next conclave were appointed by Francis, so they're like-minded. So if anything, I think the next pope will even be more progressive.
It's like the Mets fans. It's always next year.
I think when civilizations or communities, head down this downward slide, you don't have a reversion usually towards something more sane. It just speeds up, and I think it gets crazier. So I think that's what's in the future of the Catholic Church.
You're exactly right, Joseph. And the very liberal Belgian Bishop Antwerp said the same thing. Johann Boni, he praised this same-sex blessings and said, "This is moving towards future recognition of same-sex sacramental marriage in the Catholic Church." Some who are opposing it say also, we oppose it because this is a step along the way towards sacramental marriage of same-sex unions. I think you're exactly right.
So then what will all of these a billion Roman Catholics do? Will they start to think maybe this infallibility, papal supremacy dogma doesn't work? Maybe we need to rethink this. I mean, they have many opportunities to do that, but this would be the most extreme. But you don't think so?
They didn't following the sex abuse scandal. They didn't, which is a million times worse, because there you had the institutionalized rape of children. And people, I don't know. Ireland, I think I spoke to a journalist who did a lot of reporting on Ireland because the sex abuse was particularly egregious there. And I mean, the bottom has fallen out of the Catholic Church in Ireland, and I was raised by Irish priests in the United States because, every family in Ireland had a priest, So, and that's not the case now. And I think you start seeing that in Poland now, where the sex abuse is breaking, and the younger generations are falling away. And Poland was sort of the new Ireland. So I think, in a sense, people are going to start walking away. But I don't know if it's going to be over this. I mean, the trads will. But I mean, people stuck around for the pre-sex abuse. So you'll always have people that will stay. But
yeah, and they're the ones that are leaving. Are they just going to depart into atheism, into agnosticism, into Protestantism? Where do you think they're going to end up?
Possibly, yeah. I hope they become Orthodox. That's my dream, So
I heard more than one Roman Catholic priest, actually. More than one Roman Catholic told me that the papal fallibility is not true. I won't even be a Christian anymore. And so I say it straight face because these are actually friends of mine, and it's very sad, but it's really how invested they are in it. We need to have a bigger God than that. It's got to be bigger than a man.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to open up the questions now. We've had quite a discussion. It's going on 2 hours. So before we get any further, let's open the questions. And I'm going through all the comments here in YouTube mainly and Facebook, and I'm not seeing. Somehow, maybe we lost it. I don't know. I'm not seeing any starred. I don't even see the ones that
9-starred comments. I could see them.
You do?
Yeah.
I only see one starred, which is really bizarre. No idea why I don't see them. For some reason, I don't see them. Maybe you can paste them in the private chat. Can you do that for me?
Oh, sure. I'll do that right now, Father.
Paste that, and then okay. Well, who did that? It's Justin.
I just did, I think. Oh, there you go. Well, here's one of them.
There you go. You can do that
why,
as
Father?
well.
When you disappeared, maybe I became like the admin. So whatever. Here's the question.
Well, we do have Justin in the background as well, so I don't know who's doing it, but it's good. We got it on the screen. So, question: did this Cardinal Fernandez, ever repent of the erotic book he wrote? Did the Pope redact the scandalous phrase in the document regarding blessing same-sex couples? I don't think either of those are true, is it? Then
I actually don't know.
I don't think so. Kind of an interesting parallel to that story was Cardinal Paglia, who a few years ago, made some headlines because in his personal chapel, he had hired this gay artist who did this very homoerotic fresco. But the fresco was not that dissimilar from Michelangelo's Last Judgment in the Sistine Chapel. So again, I mean, there's this strain of eroticism in Catholicism that I don't know. Catholics seem to be blissfully unaware of. I mean, you mentioned St. Catherine of Sienna. She's one of those. It's kind of that bridal mysticism that you see in Catholicism that you don't have, thankfully, in Orthodoxy.
When I took a class in art history back in college, my professor commented on the cottage industry of paintings of the Theotokos, and her very basic analysis was they're trying to make gorgeous. I won't even say more than this, but gorgeous paintings of the Theotokos that were meant to be alluring to people.
Parmigianino
I just find that so blasphemous, but art historians, people that study what's going on, are aware of this. So this isn't something that Joseph is saying that has no bearing reality. Whether they're Orthodox or they're secular art historians, they're very aware this has been part of Roman Catholic religious art for some time.
Why does it seem that most Roman Catholic online apologists tend to be Eastern Rite Roman Catholics? No idea.
I got an opinion, Father.
Go ahead.
Because they know it's a bunch of nonsense. They want to straddle both, and where they ultimately land is they're not really Eastern in orientation, right? They're quoting Thomas Aquinas and stuff. They're not following Metropolitan Shevchuk and saying, well, we don't have to listen to what the Pope says, or then they're following some of the Melkite bishops that say we don't accept the ecumenical councils after the 7th, and the things that you'll find among actual ethnic Eastern Catholics. Right? They have ethnic reasons for being communing with the Pope and not with the Orthodox Church. But the apologists just want to be Latin in formation, but have an Eastern flavor to, I think, in a far well-roundedness. And we even see this in the scholarship of converts to Unionism within the Roman Catholic Church, like we see in the scholarship of Father Christian Cox, where there's really nothing Eastern about it, in all honesty, not in his approach, on his ethos, on his conclusions. And so it's just true, because unless you grew up in Western Ukraine or in Lebanon, you're just not going to have the sort of sensibilities that actual legitimate Eastern Catholics are going to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So another question from Father Joshua Elijah. I wonder about how this plays into Catholic theology heresy of divine simplicity, and how maybe this erroneous view, the Pope become the only way to God, can actually interact with the world. So is there some roots in this, he's saying, in this idea, this erroneous idea of divine simplicity? I don't know. It's a bit speculative. I don't know.
We would need Jay Dyer to answer that question.
Yeah. Somebody who's really poured into that would have to answer that. I mean, I could speculate, but it's an interesting question. Are you guys going to address the doubt versus concern argument? Doubt versus concern argument. I don't really know. I can't address it. You guys want to try to address that? What is he referring to? Maybe Mark?
Mark? Any help?
I'm not sure what that refers to.
All right. So if you could clarify, commenter, we will try to get you more information on it.
It's a little bit vague for me. I don't know. Joseph, do you know what he's talking about? No. Another question is, did not Father Schmemann and Hopko also teach doctrinal development, same as Newman? I've never read that. What's he referring to?
There's, I don't think so, but there has been Orthodox scholarship that has, because I've read it. But it's ecumenist scholarship. But I don't want to say that as a pejorative, because the ecumenist scholars right now are proudly ecumenist. It's just, these are people that are intellectually invested in trying to emphasize commonalities or establish commonalities, even when they're really not there, is a nice way to put it.
Father Hopko wrote quite a good book on same-sex attraction. I recommend it. I think it's good.
Mm-hmm. George says, I mean this respectfully, and as someone who had studied theology for decades, I could not quite make out what exactly supplicants specifically promulgated. Is that perhaps intentional? Yeah, I think it is. I think they're cloaking it as much as possible, but it promulgated a new way of blessing. We heard that from the apologists, right?
Yes, absolutely.
A new understanding of blessing.
Yeah, the last document.
Another question. Why do... Go ahead. Go ahead, yeah.
The last document that the Catholic Church came out with on this, called Responsum ad Dubium in 2021, said it is not licit to impart blessings on relationships or partnerships that involve sexual activity outside of marriage. That would include same-sex marriage. And the reasoning for that, they say, this is because they would constitute a certain imitation or analog of the nuptial blessing invoked on the man and the woman united in the sacrament of marriage. There are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar to marriage. So, and that was always the policy of the Roman Catholic Church when they advocated against homosexual civil recognition or adoptions. They would say, we cannot have any type of affirmation of these unions because that cuts into marriage. That is destructive to marriage. So this document says we're changing nothing about marriage, but it's a direct contradiction to what they've always said, that any affirmation of homosexual unions is a contradiction, is against marriage. It's also directly against what they said, that you can't bless these in the past. So this isn't just a development, which the document does call it an innovation and development. It's actually a complete 100% reversal of the stance held 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's important. I'm glad you brought that out. We should have stated that up front, but we lost you on a number of occasions, and you were the man for that. But thank you for saying that, because that's huge. And so again, not a development, even though that's what they're trying to make it sound like. It's actually a reversal from just 2 years ago. And of course, unknown pastoral practice that I've ever heard of in the history of the church. Have you ever heard of that? Let's go around blessing homosexual couples. I mean, it's unheard of.
Yeah, I think Cardinal Mueller might have still been around at that time. You know, the Francis has really cleaned house. You know, so I think there were a few rational people around back then. They're gone now. You know,
why do bishops have families in some cultures and some not? But they're all Orthodox. Just curious and sad at the division within Orthodoxy. I don't know what he's talking about. Bishops have families.
Yeah, Norient Orthodox don't operate that way. Eastern Orthodox don't operate that way.
So there are bishops taken from widowed priests. They can become bishops in the Orthodox Church. We have widowed priests, I know one in Romania who was married. His kids grew up. His wife proposed. There's been other instances of them going to the monastery, him coming a monk, and then he become a bishop. But that's the only. That's all I know.
In rare situations, even the wife could be alive, but she'd be a nun. You know, so it's and he'd be a monk. So it exists, but we don't have as people living together as man and wife in the typical sense.
Hello, everyone. They have deliberately used ambiguous language so that it can be read in different ways. I think that's right. We pointed that out earlier. They have totally lost the plot. This document should mean that Orthodox hierarchy should leave any talks with Catholicism. They are going along the same lines as Anglicanism. I would have to agree with that.
And as we discussed in the show we did together, Father, this is the exact problem over any talks of union is the relativism and postmodernism within Roman Catholic intelligentsia and their episcopacy. They'll speak out of both sides of their mouth. You're not going to know what they really believe ultimately. You have a document here that affirms the traditional view of marriage, but yet blesses same-sex couples.
We talked about this in our stream. We talked about this in our stream on modernism, and the whole way that they approach things out of context. Everything's out of context.
It's we don't read anything. They don't read anything in context or try to apply things based upon the context of their written authorities. And so it's sadly, people don't like talk about epistemology. I've been criticized for using such a big word, that theory of knowing, but because the way they go about establishing truth is postmodernist and relativist, it's not saying what they mean and meaning what they say. To put it very basic, how could you have any productive dialogue? You can't.
And to reference back to this question related to Anglicanism, in 2004, the Anglican Church said we do not bless same-sex couples. In 2007, they said we can give blessings. And in 2010, they started blessing marriages. So it's the same progression, but we have the Catholic Church just a step behind.
I had spoken to an Anglican priest that was around for that unveiling, and he said that they had the same sort of admonitions. Don't make this blessing look like a wedding. But he said it eventually happened that way. People got dressed up. They had, friends and family there, and it was a wedding without a wedding. So that I can see that happening in Catholicism within short order. So,
Father, would you agree that there are some people that are born gay, meaning they are sexually attracted to the same sex? That, of course, is their cross. Of course, just like a hetero can't act on it. So no, I would not. And that's been said famously by an Orthodox bishop who's a major ecumenist and very deluded on a number of topics. So that goes along with his other delusions. God would then have to be the author of that perversity, and that's not true.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. The majority.
Father, if I could give a hot take,
I can go on and talk more about what they might be going toward. Are people born with certain inclinations toward virtues and passions? Yes.
Yeah.
From the inheritance. That's not the same thing. Yeah.
Because
the majority.
He said quite explicitly, I won't get into the details, but that essentially the spiritual formation of the parents and the spiritual practice of parents do have effect on the unborn child who then is born and will have certain dispositions to certain passions. The question, though, is whether it's encoded in human nature per se to be a slave to the passions. The answer is no. We're made in the image of God. We're made good, and God gives the grace to overcome the passions.
Yeah. The majority of homosexuals were sexually abused as children. And the highest that number gets around among heterosexuals is about 7%. So it's a big disparity. And what's particularly evil about what the Catholic Church is doing is that a large number of gay men were sexually abused as priests. So what they're doing is they're blessing the survivors of pre-sex abuse. And it's quite sick. So,
God have mercy.
Yeah, tell me.
Despina says, thank you very much for this podcast. God bless you, Despina. Thank you for your support. Cloudy Nick says, we have friends who have long been Roman Catholic. With all that has happened with the Pope, their trust in their faith is weakened, but are ignorant about considering orthodoxy. What should I do or say to help them?
Invite them to liturgy. If they're
come and see. What does the scripture say? Come and see.
If they're readers, recommend a good book. Spend time talking to them about it. Something that came up where I go to church, because most of the liturgy is in Slavonic, was I have friends, they're serious about this, but I know because they're friends, the Slavonic may be a impediment. Well, recommend a church where that won't be an impediment per se. But there's other people that might find Slavonic or Greek very alluring, then recommend that. So, you work based upon the personal situation, the needs of the people you care about.
you have to pray and you have to offer, and God has to work in the hearts of the others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The priest that helped me, because I had spoken to him a lot, and I kept tiptoeing around orthodoxy, and he just said, "Joe, you got to get off the fence, show up for liturgy." And that's what I did. I started going every Sunday, and that's it. You got to get in it. You can't sit at home and read a book. Although books are good, you know.
Do both. You got to do both.
Yeah,
Both
yeah.
and. That's our motto
Yeah.
here at Orthodox Ethos.
Yeah.
Both and. Sir Lithius, thank you for the donation. God bless you. Is the fear of schism and doublespeak a further downstream result of the virtual distinction view that papal Protestants, that's Roman Catholics, hold in regard to the essence-energy distinction? Is the fear of schism and doublespeak, the fear of schism and doublespeak, a further downstream result? Is there fear of, the fear of schism, not the fear of doublespeak, the fear of schism and doublespeak? Yes, a downstream result of the virtual distinction view that they hold regard to essence energy distinction.
It sounds like he's saying is Scotus theology in opposition to the Dionysian and Palamite theology, the energy essence distinction, the philosophical origin of this problem. And I have to say, I understand the question, but I couldn't begin to address the answer to that question. That's again a Jay Dyer thing, as I was alluding to before.
Father John Whiteford's asking, can we now conclude that papism is gay?
I love Father John.
Well, there are quite a number of people who profess to be homosexuals in the papacy. That would be not hard to come to conclusion. So they're quite fixated on it, and they're supporting it indirectly or directly. So I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, Father and Father John, I don't know if something in the realm of ideas like papism could have a orientation. So,
well, I think Father, I don't know what Father is intending, but I think homosexuals are attracted to something inside of Catholicism, and I think they're into the obedient type of emphasis, and not that Orthodoxy doesn't have a majesty or liturgy or ritual. It does, but it's quite masculine, I have to say, in the Orthodox form. In Catholicism, there's a bit of a drag sort of mentality, and it tends to be performative, because maybe that has something to do with the iconostasis. The iconostasis kind of is separate, but within Catholicism, everything is very open. It's very stage-like. It's very dramatic, especially the high TLM mass. It's very grandiose, and I think that is attractive to something in gay men who are very theatrical. And it's you get to be a. I'm not going to say it. You get to be a bit of a superstar as a Catholic priest. Sometimes you don't have a wife, you don't have kids. You dedicate yourself completely to that. It's very attractive to certain men, and I think to homosexuals, it certainly is. You have access to children as well, too.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
Have our friends at Fordham provided any commentary on supplicants yet? I have not seen anything. Let's hope not.
So, David Gidson, who's the director of the CRC at Fordham University, did come out with a statement in support. He said, "We bless cars, guns, named a few other things. Why can't we bless two people in a loving relationship?" was his quote.
Okay, there you go.
The Jesuits are so evil. I tell you, every gay rabbit hole, every gay rat hole I went down in the Catholic Church, I found a Jesuit. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is the case? Was it just from the beginning there was a problem with the Jesuits from the very beginning? Their whole outlook, mentality.
Maybe. I think it's the discipline thing. I think it's attractive to gay men. They're kind of the elite of the supposedly of the Catholic Church. I mean, they've been very infiltrated by homosexuals. I don't think I've met a straight Jesuit. So that's just part of the process. I think it's part of the grooming program that they have going in their seminaries. And I don't know what kind of heterosexual man would be attracted to the Jesuits. I don't know who he is. You know?
That's a good. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Francisco Cambana Beltran, thank you for your question. Where I live in Mexico, there are no Orthodox churches nearby. I really want to convert because of family and work. I have to live here. What to do? Yeah, I get a lot of these questions, and the answer is that you have to pray very fervently to God to open up a door somehow to change the practical limitations. You have to go on how many times you can to the church nearest you. So if it's Mexico City, you go once a month, you go once every 2 months. You've got to have a connection and a relationship with a community, with a parish, with a priest, with the divine liturgy, with the Eucharist. But if it can't be weekly, it'll have to be whatever it is, once a month, 5 times a year. And you have to begin catechism in a community. You can do much online. You can do much reading alone. You can do a lot of prayers. You can make great progress spiritually. And you should do everything else that you can that's immediately available. But you have to ultimately get in the car, get in the plane, if it means once a year. I don't know. But you've got to have a connection because that's the incarnation. The incarnation comes down to us. The body of Christ comes down to us in time and space. He became a man in time and space. You cannot live virtually or on your own entirely. As you know, you want to become Orthodox. It's a practical problem. It can be overcome with God. So pray and then take the first step, get in the car, whatever it is, and go to whatever's closest. That's what I would say.
New Martyr Daniel Sazoya says on this question, someone writing from Sri Lanka, I think it was, that you do reader services. You seek out someone to receive the sacrament of baptism, to and receive the Eucharist. And we see in the ancient church sometimes like nomads, they live in the desert, otherwise away from churches. Once a year, they essentially make a pilgrimage to church so they can celebrate in Pascha. So, you'd have to work something out like that ultimately.
In Catholicism, this is from Irene Fonseca. In Catholicism, there is a theological position called sedevacantism. Would it be compared with the old calendarists in Orthodoxy? Not theologically, but in terms of maybe their stance socially and in terms of their standoffishness and all the rest, yes, there's some similarities. That does remind one of the two, but not theologically. I don't see any. Sedevacantism is a particular theory of the Pope no longer being on the throne, etc. You guys would know better than I would on that, but I don't see any theological parallel. Do you?
Yeah, I'd say theologically different, but similar dispositions of the people. Very conservative, very much into conspiracy theories. Exactly. I'm not even going to say that in a bad thing. Conspiracy could be true or whatever, but the point is, like, if they seem similar, it's because the people are similar, but their theological views are very different.
I was a sede for a while. That's a scene. Let me tell you, that's weird. Yeah, I got out of that fairly quickly. I was only sede for a couple of years. That's really mental. That's really not good.
So there's somewhere near wherever you were living, you were able to go, or
I used to go to the SSPX. Yeah. So because
does that also have a lot of homosexuality, or is it more clean?
No, I wouldn't say as many gays, but they've had problems. So and they have that same mentality, that same cover-up mentality. No scandal, obedient, shut up, be quiet. And the people in trad circles tend to be very, very subservient to the hierarchy and the clergy. I think they're almost more susceptible to child abuse because of that. It's not a good scene. It's bad. So
Orthodox Protestants, Father Bless, could you describe to the listeners how Orthodoxy views authority in the light of our saints as opposed to Roman Catholicism, which emphasizes a magisterium? How would you define magisterium, first of all? Because I think a lot of we don't use the term really in Orthodoxy, and I don't want to make a caricature of it. Does anyone want to try to define it? I think it's
so. Magisterium is the teaching that the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, they have authority which comes from the bishops and ultimately the Pope. So that's what defines their doctrine or teaching. How is that different from the Orthodox? We look more to the saints.
magisterium includes the entire teaching edifice, or only a certain, like,
No, it's
the Pope
yes, it's
together
the
with his bishop?
it's the official and authoritative teaching of the Roman Catholic Church is the magisterium.
But it's not referring to particular individuals, or because I always thought it was
It
referring to a
has to-
particular set of individuals.
It has
Yeah.
to refer to the Pope because the Pope is the official mouthpiece for
Yeah.
the Church.
But only the Pope, or all the bishops together with him? I mean, that's what I'm asking. Is how do they describe
As
it?
long as they're consistent with the Pope, right?
Correct.
So it's like weighted authority. Like the ex cathedra statement from the Pope is indisputable, and everything else is acceptable until it goes into contradiction with something from a Pope. So it's like weighted authorities.
So the authority in the Orthodox Church rests in the ecumenical councils first and foremost, obviously, and then in terms of decisions and infallible decisions. But it rests in the saints, because the saints are the ones again and again in the councils that really made the difference. That's just an historical fact again and again throughout church history. And so ultimately in the church in council, the entire church in council, but in the saints especially, is what I would say. And so we follow. That's why always all the ecumenical councils begin by saying, following the Holy Fathers, following the saints that came before us, following all the spiritual authorities coming down from the apostles. And so that authority is an experiential. It's experiential theology. It's theology is a theologian is one who has experience of God and speaks from experience. It's not one who speculates. It's not a philosopher. It's not an administrator. So ultimately, the church again and again has come back to sometimes just one saint, Saint Mark of Ephesus or Saint Maximus the Confessor, and that voice has been then embraced by the entire church in council and then accepted by the entire church over time. So ultimately, I think the saints would be the magisterium for orthodoxy, and it would be diachronic, and it would be it would be in time and space. It would be both and. It would not just be now appeal to the people who live today alone, like our bishop says this or our synod says this, end of discussion. That would not be sufficient. It would have to be inconsistent with all the 2,000 years of holy tradition and all the councils and all the rest. So it's both in time and space. It's both diachronically and geographically. And you can add to that if you want, Patrick.
No, I have nothing to add to say. Again, our magisterium is the consensus of the saints. The ecumenical councils, the consensus of the saints. It's a harmonious whole. We don't weight the authorities.
I like that.
Yeah. Pope Francis says, indulge your passions, do as thou wilt, and here's a blessing for your sins. Lord have mercy.
Yeah, sounds like Aleister Crowley.
God have mercy. Is there a precursor to Catholicism allowing gay marriage? Would they have to change their dogma catechism to allow it? A precursor to Catholicism. What does that mean? Was there?
Well, John Boswell thought so. So I'm going way back. So
yeah, as it was already been said, like with the Anglican Church, it starts at this, and then it inevitably develops to that. It could be a precursor. Keyword could be. Doesn't mean not everything always goes to the logical extent.
Adrian, welcome to membership on YouTube. Anybody who's interested can join for whatever it is, $2 to $3 a month. Justin says from Nico Mikliavis on IG. Okay, we're live streaming now. Most of our live streams are all going to IG. That's Instagram. So we've got people from there. Lots of questions tonight. Should an Orthodox really be concerned about what the Pope does, since he's already considered as an Antichrist by Saint Cosma? Well, we should care what he does in the sense of how does it affect millions and billions of people, and then we want to help these people come to the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Yeah, that's what we're doing here tonight. We're not coming to learn from the Pope or learn from the Vatican. Obviously, we're coming to talk about what's going on, so that you, as an Orthodox Christian, and can answer if you're asked, and then also those interested in Roman Catholics can learn what the Orthodox have to say about it. So that would be, I think, the obvious reason why we're here tonight. Metropolitan Office of Morpho in video said in video that a boy can be born gay in that the sexual sins of his mother while pregnant can traumatize his soul to incline to sodomy. Okay, in that sense, but not in the sense of from God. It's from sin that's transferred, or and again, that person is always free to resist. So I don't think I think it's a real problem with saying born gay in the sense of where's the free will? The free will is no longer there, and then God is the author of evil. Those are the two big problems with using that phrase. Let's go quickly through whatever we're going to answer because there's still tons of questions. So go ahead and jump in, but quick.
Well, I think. Oh, sorry. I think real quick. I think that those are that subscribe to the born gay stuff don't think they have to overcome anything. It's just the way they're born, and Catholic Church that go down that road say, well, you need to have a monogamous same-sex relationship. I mean, I'd been told that many times, so they don't see it as an issue. So,
did you want to say something, Patrick, or Mark? Okay, moving on. Do Catholics ever quote any scripture in their service? Of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you please make a video refuting uniatism? Former Melkite here. Okay, thank you very much. That's an important topic. I saw Jesuits in action at Mass in Fordham. Okay. Father God, God bless you. I have a few questions for you. I have heard from a few people that Vladimir the Impaler died Orthodox. Is there any proof of this? I thought he converted to Catholicism. I have no idea. Anybody know?
I was under the impression he was Orthodox his whole life, at least on paper.
Yeah, me too. I don't understand. All right, this is from Father Mikhail at Living Orthodox. The Jesuits have a tendency maybe towards homosexuality. Father James Martin blessed a gay couple the moment the document came out while they held hands. Yes.
Yep.
Famous
I know.
Picture.
Yeah, I know one of the people in that photo. They're awful people. Really, really hardcore gay activists.
So Father Martin knows exactly who he's blessing.
Oh, he's had a lot of done a lot of group sort of talks and lectures with these people. They're hardcore militant gay activists. They're not interested in God or Christ or redemption or anything like that. They're interested in pushing their cult, their LGBT cult. So,
is there a definitive criteria for what makes a council truly ecumenical within the Orthodox Church? I'll let Patrick answer that.
In the sixth session of the Council of Nicaea II, it gives a positive definition of what is the ecumenical council. In short, it's the acceptance of all of the synods of that day, which was the Pentarchy, the 5 patriarchates, and that the message of the council go out to the whole world. Now, we also know from saints like Saint Maximus that ecumenical council is recognized by its Orthodox teaching, but some people don't like that definition simply because you sort of need to know it's ecumenical to begin with sometimes to know that it's Orthodox if you have a debate over what's Orthodox. So I think in short, we can accept that ecumenical council is Orthodox and it has the acceptance of all the patriarchates. That's the positive teaching of the saints and the church. There are some other speculations, but not ones I've read in the saints or any conciliar documents.
Okay. So I forgot to thank Father Mikhail for his donation. Thank you very much, Father. God bless and good struggles to you and your show. Everybody should check out Living Orthodoxy. Father Mikhail's got a great podcast as well. Now, this is a question, a long question. I think maybe Patrick, I'll give you first shot and then we'll go from there. Question: do you believe Jesus lied or made a mistake when he said, "And so I say also unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth, shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth, shall be loosed in heaven." Matthew 18:16 to 20. I am deeply saddened, confused, and distraught. How can I don't have the rest of the question.
So essentially, yeah, if Matthew 16:18 is true, then how could the papacy fail? Well, we need to understand Matthew 16:18 as exegeted by the church, by the saints. It's the confession of St. Peter. It has to do with the entire episcopacy, and it also has to do with, amongst that episcopacy, the bishops of Rome as well, This is something, all three things are things the fathers talk about. Let me give a real succinct answer instead of a huge history lesson. All the entire episcopacy originates with the apostles, and St. Peter played a role amongst the other apostles in ordaining these bishops and creating succession. There's a sense in which all the bishops in the Orthodox Church are successors of St. Peter. And because of this, if even we took a Petrine exclusive interpretation of that passage, which is not the only interpretation of the passage given by the fathers, it would not pose an issue because we still have apostolic succession in the Orthodox Church. I think it's very important not to see a verse like that and read it in just one way. We need to look at the holistic view of the fathers on that passage.
Now, you can find an interpretation of that verse in Ephesians chapter 2, 19 to 22, where it says, "Now therefore you are no longer strangers, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together grows into a temple in the Lord." This is the confusion of the Catholic Church. Earlier we saw the quote that the Pope is Christ. The cornerstone of the church is Christ. It is not the Pope. Peter is one of the apostles, and like this verse says, and other verses say this as well, the apostles, Peter included, are stones on which the church is built, but the cornerstone is Christ, and that's what Peter is founded on, and that's why he gets the name stone, because he just made the confession, "You are Christ."
Very good. We could go on. It's a whole night. We could give a whole lecture on that, but we're going to focus on the last two, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, the real quick, Father, the Catholic Church, uses quotes like that. It doesn't explain it, but it uses quotes like that to keep people in line, to keep them subservient, and to keep them quiet. So,
Bergoglio, which is Pope Francis, is paving a wide road for the Antichrist. Thank you for your comment. And then the last one is a bit of a joke, I guess. I have a question. Father Peter, if I became Pope and then declare the papacy to be abolished, ex cathedra, am I still the Pope? No, I'll leave that for Patrick. What is that?
We'll leave that to Michael Lofton to grace us to answer that question.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Patrick, for your time. It's been a good amount of time. Hopefully, we've been helpful to a lot of people who are still searching for orthodoxy, a lot of Orthodox who are maybe wondering, what do the Orthodox have to say about these things? And we'll look forward to watching Patrick on his podcast over at Orthodox Christian Theology. And Joseph has his own podcast. Do you have a name for your podcast, or
just my name, Father?
You can find you on YouTube.
Yes,
find you
Father.
on YouTube and anywhere else.
Father.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a website. Good. I have a website too, as well.
Very good. What's your website? Your name as well?
My name, yes. JosephSciambra.com.
There you go.
Father,
look him up.
If we're doing some shameless plugs, I'll just say real quick, for those Roman Catholics that are investigating this issue and they have struggles with the idea of, they feel the absolute necessity of the papacy in total contradiction with what they see happening in reality, where there's obvious, profound issues theologically and practically in the Roman Catholic Church. I really think that the book from Accompaniment Press,
right there.
It's not coming up because of my background, but there it is.
I got it. I put it on the screen right there. It's out.
The rise and fall of the papacy.
There we go.
It's so important because we need to have an understanding of what the episcopacy was, what the church was, what the Roman church was in the first millennium. And so if you could see the holistic teaching of what the papacy was within the actual apostolic deposit of faith as it was borne out through the whole church in the first 1,000 years, I think you would find that you'd be quite at home in the Orthodox Church. And it's something that I really hope that people give a long, hard look at.
So you're going to go to uncommountainpress.com and look up the book, The Rise and Fall of the Papacy. It's on sale there. And we're very grateful for Patrick for all his long, hard work on it. It's a tremendous addition And Uncommon Press can be bringing out book after book after book for the next 6 months to a year, all in an effort to help Roman Catholics understand the ancient faith and embrace the ancient faith in Orthodoxy. If you're a Roman Catholic and you're interested, just stay tuned. There's already a bunch of books right now at Uncommon Press, but there'll be many more coming. The next one out in about a month and a half or 2 months is the Orthodox Patristic Witness Concerning Catholicism. And it's about 600 pages. It's got all the lives of the saints that have anything to do with Catholicism. So that's the magisterium of the church speaking in their life and writings about Catholicism. It has all their writings as well, conciliar decrees. So 1,000 years of witness from the fathers and the saints. What is Catholicism? What is it? How does the Orthodox Church understand it? That'll be out hopefully by March. We also have a book coming out in probably the summer called Errors of the Latins. It's 1,000-some pages, and it's a total collection, an encyclopedia of everything you need to know about Roman Catholic theology in terms of Orthodox. There's the Orthodox, it's the text and the forgeries and the historical documents and all kinds of material. So in one volume, you're trying to discern Orthodox, you're trying to discern what's true. You're going to have these two books. You're going to have the Orthodox Witness over here. You're going to have all of the problems of theology and heretical teaching of Catholicism over in this volume. In addition to the first 1,000 years, what was the papacy, rise and fall of the papacy from Patrick. And it'll be phenomenal, I think, for anyone who's sincerely trying to discern the path forward. So thank you again. God bless you. Tomorrow night, we'll have another live stream on the church and baptism. And we have a guest, Father Patrick Ramsey, who's the author of 2 books on the topic, on the church and on the minor orders of the clergy. He's a PhD from the UK. He's coming to us tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So that's 4 Pacific, 7 on the East Coast, talking all about the question of baptism in the church, the boundaries, the identity of the church. Very important topic today. A lot of confusion, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. God bless. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Clerical. Good year to everybody.
Extubri matari